Hello, Hogzilla here again. In today's video, I will be covering how to deal with each of the factions while playing Tropico 6. I will discuss what the factions are, what increases their rating, decreases their rating, and what happens if you have too low of a rating with any one faction. If you like these kind of videos, press that like button. If you have a question or any tips of your own, leave a comment below and please subscribe to my channel. The first thing we need to talk about is what are factions. Factions are various groups that your citizens can belong to based on their personal views. You can click on each citizen to see what their views they have, or you can go to the Almanac, then Politics tab to see how many citizens are in each faction, what the rating is with you, and if you click on the faction, which citizens are in each faction. There are basically two different eras, as I would call them, of factions that we will be talking about: the Colonial Era and the rest. In the Colonial Era, there are only two factions, the Royalists and the Revolutionaries. First things first, I don't know why anyone would want to increase the rating of the Royalist faction, as this will do nothing to help you in the game for the Colonial Era. Really, you want to be focusing on the Revolutionaries, as they will be the key later when you want to advance to the World Wars era. You should be doing everything to appease the Revolutionaries, as you will need to have a 60% approval from them as one of the two requirements to advance to the World War era. And frankly, you might have to eliminate people on the Royalist side just to get the second requirement to advance to the World War era. So, like I said, there's really no point, in my opinion, to making the Royalists happy. So, in the Colonial Era, what makes each faction happy? There are a couple items that make both factions happy. Those are the dock, construction building, Teamsters port, lumber mill, rum distillery, and tannery. The Revolutionaries will favor the country house, tavern, circus, newspaper, library, chapel, guard tower, fort, and pirate cove, while the Royalists will favor if you build a bunkhouse, mansion, theater, opera house, and dungeon. So don't build or minimally build these type of buildings the Royalists like. There are a couple other minor modifiers, like if your faction leader is unhappy, then this will give you a negative number towards the rating with you, El Presidente. Historical relations can also give you a positive or negative value against a faction. Once you have advanced past the Colonial Era, the Revolutionaries and Royalist factions will go away for some more permanent factions that will be slowly integrated into the game based on which era you currently are playing. The Capitalists, Communists, Religious, and Militarists appear in the World Wars era, the Environmentalists and Industrialists in the Cold War era, and then the Intellectuals and Conservatives in modern times. For the purpose of this video, I will focus on playing during the Modern Times era so that I have all the factions available for me. Most items you build will usually impact one faction positively and another faction negatively. Let's go through each faction pairing to overview how buildings impact their favorability rating with you, El Presidente. Keep in mind that, for example, not every building with the Capitalists will impact the Communist. The Capitalist building might impact the Militarists, so it won't be 1v1, so to speak, but the most common buildings on both sides will usually be the pairings you see on the left side versus the right side on the Politics tab. Let's start with the Capitalists versus the Communists. As you can see here, the capitalists will generally like anything that will make them tons of money and will hate anything that is cheap or will bring people together. They will also hate anything to do with regulation or enforcement of that regulation. The communists will like anything that brings people together, anything that employs a large number of people that produce a basic staple product, and they will hate anything of luxury. Now for the religious versus the militarists. What do the religious faction like? The question you should really be asking yourself is, what don't they like? Because it's just about everything, as you can see here. They are the hardest faction to deal with and please, and it's really only faith buildings that are a positive. Everything else is a negative. They are by and far the faction that'll cause you the most trouble while playing Tropico 6. The militarists will obviously like anything that is a military building or will provide the resources to a military building. So barracks and weapons factories are excellent examples, while anything that promotes unity will usually result in a decrease in standing with the military faction. Now for the environmentalists versus the industrialists. The environmentalists are another faction that seems to hate just about everything you do in the game. They hate anything that creates pollution or is not in line with Mother Earth, and it seems to only like anything that is clean or involves the beauty of the land. While the environmentalists seem to hate everything, the industrialists seem to like just about everything, as long as it is not liked by the environmentalists. Now for the intellectuals versus the conservatives. The intellectuals will like anything that enlightens your citizens or uses college-educated citizens, while anything with the military is looked down upon. The conservatives will generally like most things that are from the first two eras, the colonial and world wars eras, while hating a number of things from the modern times. Another thing to talk about is how certain work modes can impact your rating with factions. For example, with the Childhood Museum and Mausoleum, if you pick some of the other work modes, you can increase your standing with the faction mentioned in the description of that work mode. So be sure to check the work mode when building these new buildings. Another example is the theater, where if you pick the improv theater work mode, that can benefit your rating with the intellectual faction. Now let's talk about edicts. Most edicts will impact your rating with some faction when enacting. For example, with the Food for the People edict, this will decrease your standing with the capitalists by 10, while increasing your standing with the communists by 5. Keep these shifts in ratings in mind when enacting edicts, especially if you are close to an ultimatum demand, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So consider building some buildings for the aggrieved factions before enacting the edicts to avoid the ultimatum issue. Some of the options you select in your constitution can also impact your standing with each faction. Under armed forces, if you select professional soldiers, then your standing with the militarists are increased by 10. Under religious, if you select theocracy, then your religious standing is increased by 10. Under ecology, selecting zero emissions will decrease your standing with the industrialists by 10. Under marriage rights, if you select open marriage, then your religious standing is decreased by 10. Finally, let's talk about what happens if you have too low of a rating with each faction. If you have a low rating, then the faction will make a demand of you that needs to be completed within a certain time frame. If you don't complete this demand, then something bad will usually happen to your island. Some are worse than others. I should additionally note that in these examples, this is the most common thing each faction will ask for. Not to say that one that'll ask for building won't ask for a constitution option, and a faction that normally asks for a constitution option might not ask for a building to be built instead. This is just the most common thing I have seen, and there's a variety of demands that each faction can make if you have a low rating. Starting with the capitalists, you will usually get a demand to build an item like a modern mansion or a yacht club. If you fail to complete this demand, then for 1 year, all costs on your island are doubled. You will only get half the money for all exports and only half of the expected money when you receive Swiss money. For the communists, they will usually want a constitutional option changed. Failure for not completing a communist demand means all workers will go on strike for 1 year. This is a backbreaking issue if it occurs. You better hope that you have a stockpile of money ahead of time, as your whole island will basically shut down. You should always be trying to complete any demand from the communist faction to avoid this brutal action. If you have too low of a rating with the religious faction, you will usually get a constitution demand around making the healthcare single payer. If you do not, then your citizens will lose all rating with the religious buildings and will start setting fire to the buildings they don't like for 1 year. Not too bad in the grand scheme of things. The fires are just a little annoying, but if you have a fire station helicopter upgrade, then this is manageable. For the militarists, they usually want a building like a roller coaster. If you fail here, then your citizens that work in the military buildings will attack the palace. This one can be a little annoying, but with enough watchtowers plus barracks, this can be manageable. But note, if you are in a pacifist state for the Constitution, that can increase the danger of your palace being overrun, since they will only have the palace guards to protect you, and if they get overrun, it is game over for that map. For the environmentalists, they will usually ask for a metro station to be built. Failure to do so will result in the supporters of the faction protesting outside buildings they don't like, which results in those buildings being shut down until you take actions like any other normal protest. You will usually have to pay them off or send in the military, which turns out to be a giant pain as you are playing whack-a-mole with these protesters. For the industrialists, they will usually want a change in the Constitution, with a failure resulting in all industrial buildings and power plants doubling their pollution for 1 year. Also, for 1 year, the job quality of these buildings will be capped at 10. Each worker will lose their health care rating. Overall, it's just a very minor annoyance, and it shouldn't impact you too much. For the intellectuals, they will ask for a constitution change. If you fail, then you lose all your knowledge points and Swiss money. Your tourist rating will go down to 0, and you will gain no knowledge points for 1 year. For the conservative faction, they will usually ask for a building they favor, like a police blimp. If you fail the conservative faction, then they will call early elections. These elections are different because instead of the normal 24-month of campaigning you get with scheduled elections, you only have 12 months before the election actually occurs, plus you don't get to make any speech to try to raise your approval rating. If you even have a mid-50s or lower rating, Overall, with your island citizens, you might have a chance of losing the election and losing whatever map you are playing on. Just like failing a communist demand, you should avoid failing a conservative demand, because usually if you're getting a conservative demand from them, your approval rating might overall already be in trouble, and having to fend off an election is the last thing you need. I should also note that you can enact the martial law edict to pause the election if the conservatives call an early election. But with the devastating consequences of the martial law edict, as I have mentioned in my election video, you should try to avoid the early elections all around so you don't even have to take these drastic steps. That is all for this video. If you like these kind of videos, press that like button. If you have a question or any tips of your own, leave a comment below so I can reply, and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time!